Yes, team. Hello and welcome to the podcast. My name is Ollie McCarthy, and this is a transition point. I feel like that's something that I'll probably say or refer to quite a lot during this podcast. But this podcast used to be known as Training to Endure, and from now onwards will be known as the Wild Path podcast. And obviously, one of the things that we're going to do today is actually dig into why the change and what that means moving forwards. If you follow me on Instagram, and obviously if you don't, then you can find me at Ollie W. McCarthy. If you follow me on Instagram, you would have seen, or you might have noticed that there's been a change in my messaging and actually some of the things I'm beginning to talk about. And being able to evolve this podcast and move forward aligned with myself, aligned with the way that I want to coach, I think is really important because it will also influence some of the conversations that I'm having moving forwards. Now, you would have heard, if you're a regular listener, the stories from Alex and Mike, who are two clients of mine. And while we do touch on the importance of endurance and how training has given them a lot, a new lease of life somewhat, something that I personally noticed was that it was more than just the training. It was, everything. It was whole human health and how they moved into that. It was about, yes, them getting fitter, yes, them getting stronger, but also about how they changed their mindset, how they got confidence from what they were doing, how they begun to look at the things they valued the most in life and live their lives aligned to that. It was about their nutrition, their hydration, but also about the inputs they were putting into their own mind, what they were exposing themselves to mentally as much as physically. And then I began to think about that transition point that they'd both found themselves in, Mike having given up alcohol and suddenly having this desire to move, Alex from getting to a point where he had placed so much emphasis on his career and performance in that sense, and then getting to a point where he burnt out and almost had to work out who he was again. And when you hear those stories, and also with my own personal story, what it began to show me is that it's more than just the training. And I know there was always that theme within the conversations I was having. There was always that transfer of how endurance translates to the rest of life. However, I'm at a point in my career where my coaching is about to evolve, and therefore the conversations that I want to have moving forward will evolve and change as well. And so we come to this kind of point where for that to happen, the podcast needs to evolve and come with me. And I believe, if you've been a listener for a while and you've been enjoying the conversations that I've had and the things that I've said, I genuinely believe that this is going to be a positive thing moving forwards, and that actually the kind of depth that I want to be able to add to the podcast and the conversations that I want to have will benefit you moving forward. Obviously, that is down for you to decide. But 18 months ago when I became a dad, um, you know, everyone tells you that life will change and then you experience it and you're like, fucking hell, yeah, life really does change, doesn't it? And, my own personal journey into fatherhood was fraught with struggle and challenge and change. And struggled to transition into this new way of life. Obviously, our story was quite different in a sense that we went into it 3 months early, completely unaware of what was going to happen. And then we spent 3 months in neonatal intensive care units, and that was a very different experience to the way that most people experience fatherhood and parenthood. But I got to a point where I realized that I wasn't living a life truly aligned to what mattered to me. And I have had allowed the noise and the perceptions of what I should be doing and the way I should be doing stuff and how I should be presenting myself. And these stories were, getting in the way of actually really living a life that was aligned with me and with the way that I wanted to do it. There were glimpses and bits of it, but when I got to that point, it just felt heavy. The pressure of being a dad, trying to provide for the family, trying to be there for clients and turn up in the way that I perceived I needed to, and all of that just got, yeah, heavy. And I wasn't enjoying what I was doing. I was getting ill the whole time. I was at a point where I had no passion with what I was doing. I know the term burnout gets thrown around, and I wasn't burnt out to the point of feeling like I needed to be in bed all the time, but I was burnt out in the sense that I just didn't have the enjoyment and fulfillment in the way that I was doing things anymore. And I got to this point where I knew something needed to change, and I knew that I needed to change. And, luckily I managed to, to get some help. A friend of mine suggested I get in contact with an absolute legend named Kira. And I guess over the last 7, 8 months, we've been on this kind of journey of like actually really redefining what I want, who I want to be, what a good life looks like to me. And within that, tearing away all of these different areas of the way I should, the way I perceive I need to act. I'll give you an example of, you know, being a running coach, being a coach and feeling like you need to constantly be training, constantly be showing that you're walking the walk and doing the do, which look, I think is important, but also that comes at the cost of energy. And when you are dealing with minimal sleep and stress that jumps out of nowhere, as kids have this beautiful way of doing, and you're trying to do, you get half a day's work done, and you're on the phone to the nursery and having to go and pick up the little one, and you're meant to have done your training that day. And what I found was I was getting so caught up and rigid in that the training still needs to get done at all costs. I still need to make sure I'm doing this. Rather than being able to flex and flow. The the running coach conversation of, I built this identity up online as being a running coach, and so I must be out running the whole time. I must be showing that I'm doing this, and I must be showing that I'm achieving this. And look, I believe there is a time and a place for that, but it has to align with the life you have and the life you're living. And again, I'll go back when you're going through periods of stress and you're going through these periods where you're not sleeping well and you've got to be up at early mornings and you actually just need the flexibility to say, do you know what? I'd be better off just resting, or that training can wait, or in some extremes, I'm not training this week. And understanding that the world's not going to crumple, it's not going to fold, that actually having a week where you are under a lot of stress, when you're under a lot of pressure, just being able to relax in and take the pressure off training will actually allow you to turn up as the best version of yourself in all other areas of life. There's no point in me grinding myself down to the bone and training the whole time if it comes at the cost of my family and my clients. Like that, it doesn't make sense to me. And look, I can say that now off the back of spending a lot of time, working through that and thinking of that. And it's taken 7, 8 months for me to get to a point where I've really honed in on the things that I want and the life I want to lead. And now it's quite freeing being there. So I guess if we go back full circle, it's when I think back to the conversations I had with Alex and with Mike, and I think back to all the other clients that I've worked with over the years, there's patterns, you know, there's patterns of these transition points where people come in and they're at this transition point of change, of knowing that there's a disconnect between the life that they're living and the one that they want to live. There is an increase in responsibility that they didn't have before, and they're trying to navigate that. And actually, they're people I want to help. I want to help other people do the same because if I if I dig down, and I talk about the place I'm in now, it's light, it's free, it's happy. I enjoy what I do. I have that fire in my belly, that passion back, and I want to help other people do the same. And I think there's no reason why they can't. I want to help dads in my position navigating their first kid or their third kid and what that means, and being able to turn up for themselves as well as everybody else. Because again, if you think about Mike and you think about Alex, they tried to put everyone else first. They tried to prioritize everything and everyone else, and that came at the cost of themselves a lot of the time. And to some extent, I did the same. I tried to be the provider. I tried to be there for my clients, and I was trying to do everything that I thought I needed to do, but I didn't hone in on what actually that I needed to do. And for me, that was take a step back. For them, it might be slightly different. For someone else, it might just be creating some stability around them getting in and creating some space for themselves. For someone else, it might be just giving them a bit of structure so they can go in and train and feel good. So that's the point I'm at now, and that's where we're going with things. I genuinely believe that we have the capacity within ourselves to live an absolutely extraordinary, beautiful life. And we can often get sidetracked by all the noise around us, all the shit we see on Instagram and we allow to come in between our ears. instead of actually working out what we want to do. Like, what the fuck do you want to do with your life? Because if you're not doing that thing now, then maybe you should. Maybe that is what you need to begin working towards. We only get one opportunity, so we might as well grab it with both hands and make the most of it. So yeah, that is me. We're obviously going to build out on this. We're going to get some incredible guests on. We're going to talk all things health, fitness, fatherhood, masculinity, and beyond. So for those who want to walk a different path, they want to take the slightly wilder path, please join us for the journey.